Radio TV phono nut here, and we have a Newcomb model RT12 solid state classroom record player from the mid-70s. Now if I pause this video a lot, it's because I'm still battling allergies or whatever this is. So in this case, the stop button on the camera is going to be the cough button. So anyway, this set is from the mid-70s. It's a solid state entry-level model, model RT12, which was the solid state replacement for the older tube R12 model. Now this works, but the audio is weak. And that's wide open, and it's pretty lackluster there. Now, the cartridge can cause that problem, but before I started this video, I substituted another cartridge, and that didn't seem to solve the issue, so we have an amplifier problem, likely a dried out capacitor. About the only thing I don't like about these later Newcomb record players is this plastic arm rest / lock, and it seems like most of the ones I find are broken. So when you unclip the tone arm, you just want to gently pull this back just enough to lift the arm. Don't go yanking back on it, because if you do, it's probably going to break. And the fact that it's 50-year-old brittle plastic doesn't help the situation. And here's our speaker, 6x9. This was made November 1975, and there's the schematic in case we need it. And here's the underside with your typical general industry shaded pole motor that has a separate winding on it to provide low voltage for the amplifier. Here's the amplifier, and during this time period, Newcomb was using a supplier of capacitors that evidently didn't hold up well, because I've ran into some from this era where every cap in it was bad. So we're going to get the ESR meter. Looks like only 3 of them here, and we're going to test them and see what we can find. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably that little small blue one there that's open. Here's the blue one, and it actually looks pretty good, surprisingly. Alright, this silver one is nearly open, and that other silver one isn't too good, so I'm going to change both of those. Okay, there's all 3 of them replaced, a 10 and 2 100s. I have no idea who made these capacitors. There is no manufacturer's brand on them. One of them just says made in Mexico on it, so who knows where they got those from. Alright, let's see if this is any better. Yeah, that's a little better. Alright, looking at the schematic, that 100 microfarad cap that was in worse shape appears to be an emitter bypass cap for the first AF transistor. And even though it sounds better, I think it could still be a bit better than what it is. And I didn't even think to check this 430 microfarad speaker coupling cap. There's a good chance it's dried out too, so I guess we need to tear back into it. Just me being hasty, not feeling well, and trying to get it done before the rain comes. I sort of jumped the gun. Alright, 15 ohms ESR for a 400 odd microfarad cap is a bit on the high side, so I'm going to go ahead and change that too. Yeah, see, that's our speaker coupling cap, and there's our filter hidden under this heat sink here. Alright, there's the filter and the speaker coupling cap. I put them on the bottom side of the board because I was having trouble getting them to fit in between that heat sink, and also putting them here will prevent those caps from getting baked by the heat being produced from those audio output transistors. So now let's put it back together and see how it is. Alright, that's a lot better. Yeah, that's about what I would expect it to sound like. Okay, good. Now I think we can call this one done. Now eventually I need to clean and lubricate the drive mechanism, but that'll have to wait for another day. And this one does have a genuine 3mm stylus on the 78 side, which is good. Alright, that's a 45, and that sounds decent. Now, if I had a choice between this or a Crosley Cruiser, I would take this hands down if I needed a portable record player. The only downside to these is the static 89T plug-in cartridge is getting to be scarce and expensive. Now back in the day I was buying those for $5 a piece. Now nobody makes a decent replacement, and the new old stock ones that turn up, you can count on spending at least $45 for one. Now Fan Steel currently offers a replacement, but I can't recommend it because someone gave me one of those and I tried it in a record player and it had severely low output, and after talking to some other people I've heard the same thing from them. In fact, the VM site was selling it, but they stopped selling it. From what I was told by someone who contacted the VM site about it, is they quit selling it because they had too many customer complaints about the poor sound quality, so they just stopped selling them. So the problem is these 89Ts put out about 1.3 volts, whereas a conventional ceramic cartridge only has an output of about a half a volt, and you wouldn't think that would make much of a difference, but it does. If you put a modern half volt cartridge in this, the volume level is going to be greatly diminished and your tonal quality is not going to be up to par either. So in order to use a modern cartridge in this, you would have to build some kind of preamp circuit to go between the cartridge and the amplifier input, and that's something that we're going to try to work on, hopefully, in the not too distant future, because paying $40 or $50 for an 89T cartridge with sapphire tips is ridiculous. I mean, you can buy an Audio-Technica 3600 magnetic cartridge for less money than that, but unfortunately something like this really wouldn't be suited for a magnetic cartridge. But just to give you an idea of price comparison, when a ceramic sapphire tip cartridge costs more than a entry-level magnetic cartridge, then something is bad wrong. And with as many of these classroom record players that are apparently still out there, you would think someone would make a decent quality, affordably priced replacement for that 89T cartridge. Alright, so I guess that's about all I've got for this one for the time being. So it's a simple repair, just a capacitor job on this one. So hopefully there'll be more to come later. Well, revisiting the Newcomb, and I certainly didn't have to tell you this. I could have just corrected the mistake and made out like I'm some sort of superhuman who never makes mistakes, but I'm going to own up to it just to illustrate, mainly to illustrate a point. I was playing some records on this thing and I smelt something that smelt like an electrolytic capacitor heating up and fixing to pop, and I opened it up and this filter capacitor was pretty toasty and the paper was kind of crinkled up on it and the top of it's kind of vented. So you know what? I think I wired this little son of a gun in backwards. So we're going to have to remove that and reverse it and hope all is well. Alright, we're running cool as a cucumber now, and no stink, no puff up, so we ought to be back in business now. This just This just illustrates something that I've brought up in other videos as far as I don't care how much experience you have, I don't care how long you've been doing something. Well, don't those two things both basically mean the same thing? Yeah, but anyway, what I'm getting at is I don't care how many years you've been doing something, how smart you are, how smart you think you are. The fact is, we're all human beings. And yes, we should be careful and strive not to make mistakes, but the cold hard facts are that from time to time we are going to make mistakes. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that we made a mistake, as long as we learn from that mistake and try to take steps not to make that same mistake again in the future. So, let's put it back together and see how it works. It might even be louder now since we have this capacitor in the correct way. Oh yeah, it's louder. It's a lot louder now. Oh yeah, that gets plenty loud now. And tonight on Oldies Radio, that's Sounds of the Letterman from 1966 with You'll Be Needing Me Baby. Now stay tuned. Right after this break, we have some Ms. Miller coming up by request. But in the future, I will try to pay better attention so we don't smoke any more electrolytic capacitors. But in all honesty, there's a good chance it'll probably happen again. Well, the Newcomb record player is still performing nicely sometime later, but I want to end this video with a little rant. And it has to do with thieves, and it's like I've told people many times, I can tolerate a lot of things. A thief is not one of them. Do not steal from me. If you see something of mine that you think you've got to have, then ask me and we'll try to work something out. And believe me, out of all this junk over here, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that if somebody saw it and expressed an interest in it, I'd probably give it to them. But do not take it upon yourself just to help yourself to it. And this all goes back to how I was raised. I was brought up that if I was caught shoplifting anything, then the first thing that was going to happen is I'd get my butt torn up. And then the second thing that would happen is Mama would have marched me back to that store, and then I would have been apologizing to the manager and returning whatever it was I stole. And then years later, an older guy at church wanted me to fix his VCR, so I told him I'd do what I could for him. So he handed me the VCR at church. I brought it home, and this was before the neighborhood was what it is today. I just set the VCR under the carport with some more stuff and didn't think anything about it. We went back to church that evening, and whenever we came home, guess what? The VCR and a couple of CD players that belonged to me were missing. Well, I called the gentleman at church just knowing that he was going to lower the boom on me, and he would have been well within his right to do so. I told him what happened. I could tell he was ticked, but he did not unload on me. And I told him, I said, Mr. Marlott, I will buy you a new VCR. And he said, you don't have to do that. That's not necessary. And I said, well, yes, it is, because I took for granted that because this neighborhood is safe, that nothing would happen to your VCR, and I should have locked it up, but I didn't, so I owe you another VCR. And I bought him a VCR, and all was well. And all I can say is, I'm glad that VCRs were not $1,200 by that point anymore. I think that one was about $129 or something like that. Now, this fella was from Chicago originally. He was pretty high up in the railroad, the business end of the railroad, and the man had a business head on his shoulders, and he didn't take any crap off of people. I don't know how he wound up down here in Mississippi, probably because of his railroad job, but I've seen him more than once lower the boom on people at church board meetings when they were contemplating doing something that he didn't go along with. And I remember one time he even let a 4-letter word slip at a church board meeting. So, knowing the kind of fella he was, I just knew he was going to unload on me when I called him, but he didn't, surprisingly. Well, fast forward to more modern times, there was a guy in our antique radio club back when we had one, and this guy had a lifelong career in working in radio and doing engineering work for radio stations, and I believe his first job was with WCOC Radio, which was the oldest radio station in the area. Well, somewhere along the way, he acquired one of the WCOC turntables, which was an old Gates 16-inch job from probably the 1940s. It did not have 45 on it. It was just 33 and 78. And then whenever he passed away, the turntable was still around, and his daughter had it. And at one point in time, me and her communicated, and I told her, that I knew her dad and all that, and I said, if you ever decide to part with a turntable, please let me know, and she said, I will. Well, sometime later, she got in touch with me, and she said, I really wasn't wanting to part with a turntable, but we're having to downsize. We can't keep everything, and, since you knew Dad, I'd love for you to have the turntable. You're welcome to it, but just give me a little time, give me a couple of weeks till we've got some loose ends we've got to square away with our parents' house and other things. And I said, well, just whenever you're prepared, just contact me. Well, a couple of weeks went by and I didn't hear nothing. About a month or so went by, still didn't hear nothing, but I made up my mind that I was not going to inquire, because I know how it is when you're trying to tie up loose ends. Sometimes it takes a lot longer than anticipated, and things come up that you didn't really anticipate. So I figured if she decides to let go of it, she'll contact me. Well, today she contacted me, and it was not the news I wanted to hear. She said, I fully intended to give you that turntable, but when we moved a lot of stuff out of the house into storage, someone broke into the storage locker and stole a bunch of stuff, and that turntable was one of them. Well, you don't know how much that infuriates me, and I would be just as infuriated if the turntable with my name on it hadn't been involved. But yes, I am bummed the turntable fell through, because I've been wanting one of those 16-inch turntables for ages, and the ones that always turn up on eBay are always way more expensive than what I can justify. And all the radio stations around here, most of them have changed hands 10 times over the years, got rid of anything like that years ago, so that probably knocked down my only shot of getting a turntable like that I can afford. So I told her, I said, well, I'm sorry that this happened, but if there are any items that you'd like for me to keep a lookout for, I will, because I go to a lot of flea markets. I feel like probably what happened, it was probably some meth heads that broke in there and stole the stuff, and I feel like they'll either sell the stuff to some shady flea market flipper, or the stuff will wind up on eBay. I've already looked on eBay, and as of yet, I don't recognize the turntable, but we'll just see. But I'm not holding my breath on that turntable. I think that's probably over and done with. It'll probably never be seen again. But one thing's for certain, the one who stole that gentleman's VCR off my porch, the one who stole that lady's stuff, including the turntable that was supposed to go to me, it'll come around and get them one day. They may not have to answer for it in this lifetime, but one of these days they'll have to be held accountable for their actions. But the thing is, a lot of people that do crap like that, they don't believe in God anyway, but it don't matter whether you believe in Him or not. You're doing stuff like that, and you will have to face the consequences for it one day. Alright, that's about all I've got for now. I'll put the schematic for this record player up at the end of the video. You can pause it if you want to, in case so you can see what's in it. And we'll come up with something else later.